Hey everybody, this is Chris Thompson, and welcome to session number 32 of Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel. He has a signed Salvador Dali print, a Russian submariner's watch, and a didgeridoo made for him by a one-armed man. Welcome
correct.
back.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here again in Toronto, Canada, the very umbilicus of global hypnosis. And we will be teaching again yet another Architecture of Hypnosis course open to the planet, 5 days in a row, a beautiful Monday to Friday in sunny July when Toronto is beautiful, the city is warm and welcoming and multicultural and rich with restaurants and deep repose so you can come and trance with us.
All right, umbilicus. I love that one. That's great.
Yes, but far be it from us to engage in omphaloskepsis. We do not sit gazing at our navels. No, our gaze is outwards at the rest of the planet, and that's to whom we are speaking now.
Awesome. So welcome back, everybody. And, man, we've done over 30 of these. This is fantastic. Hey,
unbelievable, isn't it?
Mike, tell me about the one-armed man and the didgeridoo.
Oh, you serious? Well, I know you knew I had a didgeridoo. You've not seen it. Someone has evidently told you. Back in, I think it was 1994, I was in Australia for my, I think, third tour, and my wife came with me because I'd raved about this gorgeous country where the only thing similar to what we have in North America is grass and flies. Everything else, every bird, every plant is completely different, every animal. And I had a wonderful time, so I took my wife with me, and it was actually my birthday when we were there. And I wanted to buy a didgeridoo, which of course is the Aboriginal instrument of a hollowed-out log, and they kind of droning sound. They can make barking sounds and bird sounds through it, and so on. Thousands of years old. I thought this was a very cool thing. And I kept attempting to buy one, and my wife kept, no, it's not good enough. No, you don't need one, which is fairly typical. For anyone who's married will understand this. So anyway, what I didn't know was my wife and my road manager had contrived to celebrate my birthday in an interesting way. And so we got up in the morning of, and they said, we're going on a little journey. And we went out into the suburbs, I believe it was in Sydney, and a one-armed man came to the door. And he was very Crocodile Dundee-ish, and he had a hook for a hand, and his name was Charlie McMahon. And Charlie McMahon is the greatest white, arguably the greatest white didgeridoo player in the world. He plays like a native. He's lived out in the outback and eaten witchetty grubs and honey ants and all these amazing things. And he plays with circular breathing, so he never has to take a breath. He's breathing in through his nose as he's blowing out through his mouth, and it's phenomenal. He can make it sound incredible. Well, anyway, my wife and my road manager had arranged, and Charlie McMahon himself, with his, he's played with bands like Midnight Oil, and he had his own band, Gondwana Land, which are incredible. He made me a didgeridoo. And he had a termite hollowed-out log. He painted it himself with rock pigments, and absolutely incredible. And it was just drying when I arrived. And I walked in, he shook my hand, I think, with his hook. And he said, here's your didgeridoo, mate. And I went, this is for me. And then I got a picture of us both playing them together, although mine was still wet with paint. And that was the story of the didgeridoo. So I didn't get to buy one, but I got a far better one.
I think there's probably some good metaphor material in there somewhere.
Or was it already there?
So, all right. Hey, let's, before we start, and this podcast is going to be fantastic. This is all going to be about increasing intelligence.
Yes, it is. And we think our last podcast was a little advertisement heavy. We didn't get any complaints, but Chris has just evaluated this, and I'm inclined to agree with him. So we're keeping this very light on self-promotion, and we're just going to give you some really cool information you can use to get smarter.
Yeah. Now, before we do, though, I had a question from Francis in Munich, just thanking us for the podcast. We get a lot of these emails saying, hey, thanks for the podcast. We really enjoy it. But he had a great question, said, what did you mean by having a best friend who is a mutant with 3 kidneys?
Dankeschön, Francis. Das ist sehr gut. Interesting thing is, I do have a best friend who has 3 kidneys, but he's not a mutant. My friend Michael C. Anthony, who's my best friend in the world. We've been great friends for 15 or 20 years. Anyway, he lives in Florida, and he's a phenomenal stage hypnotist, a natural entertainer, an excellent keynote speaker. And when he and I hang out, we play backgammon for money and just laugh our brains out. But he discovered he had polycystic kidney disease a few years back, which is incurable. Basically, his kidneys were the size of T-bone steaks and covered with nasty little nodes and blisters and things. So they were becoming non-functional. His brother, Joe, donated a kidney for him. I remember Mike, told me he was going through all this, and he asked if I would donate a kidney, and I basically told him to get stuffed. I said, you've already burned out 2 of them. You think I'm going to give you a third one? You're showing you're irresponsible as it is. So we had a good laugh about that, because he's the sort of guy that I remember being in hospital with pneumonia at death's door on oxygen and IV. And he leans forward and says, "It's because it's not pneumonia." He said, "You have undiagnosed terminal cancer." He knew I would laugh about it one day. Of course, I wanted to rise from the bed and kill him at the time because it was what was going through my mind. But we have this great sense of humor between us. But anyway, I decided to mention it in the podcast. He has his brother Joe's kidney at the front of his abdomen, and the other two are still in place, and he's going to have them roto-rooted out at some point where they liquefy them and suck them out of your body. So he will then be my mutant friend with one kidney.
Oh, man, instead of liposuction, it's kidney suction, essentially.
I think it would be renal suction, actually, Chris.
That's just, yes, I guess that would be the medically professional way to say it. That's really horrible.
So where do we go from here? So the question from Munich from Francis has been answered. Glad you like the podcast. We will keep putting them out there all day. We want to let everyone know we think we have enough information left for only about 7,000 more podcasts.
Yeah, then we'll have to call it quits.
We'll have to pack it in.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, while we're still able to continue then, let's talk about increasing intelligence. So,
Okay.
I know you gave me a whole big list of things you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, this is a very common question I get when I do a keynote, especially in universities. I meet a lot of really interesting young people who say, "I just wish I could be smarter. How can I get smarter? How have you learned all this stuff?" And one of them called me the walking encyclopedia, which was a wonderful compliment, but he's obviously never seen the areas in my life that I'm incredibly deficient in, like mechanical skill, where I cannot put in a screw into a pre-drilled hole with a screwdriver without almost taking my own head off with the screwdriver, and a 1 hour building of a gas barbecue took me about 6 hours. Nightmare stuff. But the intelligence stuff I have worked on for a number of years, and one of the ways you can build your intelligence is to approach it from a number of different angles. For example, I have mentioned the reticular activating system, the RAS, and its role in determining the locus of our attention, or what we focus on, the reticule of our brain or mind. And you can tune your reticular activating system by asking the right sort of empowering questions. And if you continuously say things like, or if one continuously says things like, or asks things like, "Why am I so stupid all the time?" your brain will generate answers to that. Well, your friends are stupid, your parents are stupid, you don't eat right, and you'll come out of it thinking you are stupid. Instead, you tune your reticular activating system by asking not "why am I stupid?" but "how can I get smarter?" In fact, make it an even better question. How can I get smarter today than I was yesterday and have an absolute blast doing it? And your unconscious mind will begin to find answers to that question. And there are numerous ways you can get smarter. You must build your schema, SCHEMA. The schema is the requisite information you need for any particular task. And you can build what I call bulk schema, which is an overflow of essentially superfluous schema until you need it, by learning a wide variety of topics. Generally speaking, your brain will interlock information that you have learned with other information you have learned, and it will make connections because your brain is a self-patterning machine. And if you continuously learn new subjects you have never studied before, you'll begin to open up new neural pathways, and that's the important thing. If you do what you have always done all the time, you will get atrophy. You'll get reversed neuroplasticity, and your neural pathways will start to disappear at the axon level, and you will discover you're getting stupider. And that's why television, watching the same programs every week and the same sports every week, and flopping down in front of the tube every night and going into your TV trance and numbing out and dumbing out will make you stupider.
Okay, so how you build your schema by learning new things. I know you've like written words sometimes you've written words for me and said, "Here, add this to your schema."
Right.
And by that you mean increasing your vocabulary.
Vocabulary, for sure. See, language is a remarkable tool. It is a tool and a weapon depending on how it's used. It's a weapon if it's used to propagandize an entire population. And it can be a tool when it's used in something like Ericksonian hypnosis. Without language, there is no logic. You must have language to have logic, because when you take something like modus tollens or modus ponens, the Latin principles of, if A, then B, it is B, therefore A, like these different maxims of logic require language to work. And when we have no firm grasp of our language, and English, of course, being the richest language in the world, in which you can say more things in more ways than any other language, if you don't master these tools, then you are leaving yourself without a large degree of logic as well. You must be able to make connections. And so I recommend people buy a really good dictionary. I mean, a big hardcover one, Oxford, Webster, doesn't matter. And leave it on your desk or where you're going to see it every day with a marking pen, a highlighter at least. And you want to browse in this every now and then. Just flip through it. Anytime you read a word that you don't understand, don't continue reading. Immediately, if you're reading, a newspaper or an article, you hit a word you don't know what it means, go to your dictionary, highlight it in the dictionary, learn it, understand it, then continue reading. A misunderstood word will stop you from grasping much of what follows. So get in the habit of acquiring new words all the time. You can put them on flashcards. Words like glanative and dursative that I've used extensively in these podcasts. Actually, don't pick words like those. They're completely contrived and made up and mean essentially nothing. Although glanative is a positive one and dursative is negative, they're fun to throw into conversations with wordsmiths and clever people because they won't admit they don't know what they mean, and they'll go running for the dictionary. When they can't find them, they'll think they're just spelling it wrong, which is always enjoyable. So acquiring new words is important. Make sure that acquisition of language is a major part of your life. Learn new languages. You don't have to master them, but get a smattering of different languages. Blow open some new neural pathways. I can get by in French. I have a bit of German, and I have a smattering of phrases and words that will prove useful in, in Italian, Russian, Japanese, Chinese, Serbo-Croatian. No, I'm making that one up. But Haitian Creole and a few others. And if you throw these into conversations with a native speaker, they love you immediately. But the point is, get your brain full of new stuff. If you start with approximately 1 trillion neurons and you've been losing them at the rate of about 1,000 to 3,000 per day, they are not very robust. And with neurogenesis, we do get new neurons, but not many. So put something worthwhile in them. And acquisition of language is very, very important because you need it to be logical. So that's one thing you can do. The dictionary. Use a dictionary, learn from it, get some new words, and apply them in your conversation right away. And it's way more fun to say explication than lengthy explanation. I mean, it's just a better sounding word, and it's more accurate. And watch out for like I said, sitting in front of the television and zoning out all the time. I know you're not a big TV guy, are you, Chris?
Not anymore. I mean, I've cut the cord at home. There are a few shows.
Cut the cord. We're back to the umbilicus.
Cut the cord is just an expression for not having cable anymore, right?
Yes, but it also comes from childbirth. Right?
Yes. Cut the cord. Well, the cable cord is, and
but you still watch Dexter.
Oh, my kids have Netflix, and we watch a few TV shows, but it is not the same as plunking down on the couch and hitting that power button on the TV and just zoning out and watching commercials. And it's a never-ending cycle. It's a broadcast TV, right? So it just never ends. And when do you stop watching? Well, when you decide it's finally time to go to bed. No, instead, we have a certain number of shows that we watch, and it's usually about an hour a night. And we watch the show, and it's over.
Yeah, and that's perfect. You have to limit this sort of thing because, remember, reading is active and television is passive. And I've said before, television is the most prolific trance inducer in the world. Just watch people. The longer they watch it, the deeper they go. They sink lower into the chair. Their responses become slower. They're going into deep hypnotic states. And when you are in those states, you are prey to the advertisers. There is an agenda behind these ads. They're not just randomly thrown in with what you're watching, and especially with product placement and so on. If you are aware of this, you can say, oh, I'm aware of what they're doing, so it won't affect me. Wrong. It's getting you unconsciously, and you have to wean yourself from large amounts of television. And at worst, do what Chris does and his family. Just limit it to a few certain things and then switch it off. Do something active. Get out and do some exercise. Walk, get out in the woods. Do something that is brain nourishing, which brings us to the next thing in our list.
So the next thing on the list is omega-3. Tell me about that.
Okay, I can't tell you to do this because I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just going to tell you what I do. I take omega-3 fish oil every day because there are numerous studies. I think there's been over 3,000 studies that confirm its efficacy in a wide range of things. It is a general anti-inflammatory, and much disease begins with inflammation, probably heart disease as well. So omega-3 fatty acids are really important to take. I take them every day in the form of fish oil. I get a Norwegian fish oil, herring oil, which is low on the food chain. This is not cod liver oil. And studies have shown if you're getting omega-3 fish oil, not omega-6 and 9, you get 14 to 20 times too much 6 already and enough 9. It's the 3 you must supplement if you're going to do this. And check with your doctor first before you do any of these things. But I take omega-3 every day, and I found increased mental clarity, better quality of sleep, lower blood pressure, lower cholesterol. And it's the building block for neural pathways. Your brain needs essential fatty acids, and you're going to find it in this fish oil. When I was a kid, my mom would always make me eat, halibut or salmon once a week. That was your Friday thing. And, because fish is brain food. And it turns out my mom was right. Fish is brain food. If you're taking fish oil, you're getting something like the equivalent of half a pound of salmon a day. So get onto that as well. If you want to follow what I do, it's entirely up to you.
Mike, this brings up a point, though. Food in general, right? Not just omega-3 and fish oils, but food in general has become such an issue. And I mean, you've got to eat healthy foods that are good quality, not processed, genetically modified, engineered foods.
Sure.
If you want to be smart. How much of the brain is lipid?
Well, most of the brain is lipid, really.
Which is fat.
Yeah, your brain is loaded with fatty tissue. And you've got to feed it the omega-3 fatty acids. And other things that are good are, my friend Mike was telling me about someone he knows who has started to show signs of dementia, and he has been loading up on coconut oil, tablespoons full, morning and night. I think 3 in the morning, 3 at night, which tends to cause a bit of a loosening in the colon. Yeah. But one quickly becomes accustomed to dealing with that. I mean, it's not out of control. And coconut oil has virtually reversed this progression of dementia with him. I mean, it's startling. They say he's become a new man. Again, a fatty acid that is required by the brain. So you mentioned food. My wife has a fridge magnet that says, try eating organic food, or as your grandparents called it, food.
Actual food.
Just food, right?
Well.
And, a couple of things you really got to avoid if you want to have optimal brain health, and hence intelligence, is excitotoxins. Now, excitotoxins tend to cause the neurons to hyperexcite, and they basically self-destruct. Someone said, excitotoxins, that's not a real... No, it's the actual name. They're a toxin that overexcites your brain cells. And it's very, very bad for them. It's like revving the engine of your car. And the problem is, with processed food, they're found in almost everything. Aspartame is an excitotoxin. Monosodium glutamate is an excitotoxin. I disagree with one neuroscientist who said, it's not a problem. The MSG thing isn't a problem because our brains are full of glutamate, which is true, they are. But there's something about when you add the sodium molecule to it, the sodium atom, it has an excitotoxic effect. And many, many people can attest to what they call Chinese restaurant syndrome, and they're super sensitive to this. They come out from eating Chinese food when they used to, have 40-pound bags of MSG in the old restaurants and ladle it into the food, because MSG does not affect the food. It affects your receptors so that the food tastes better in your brain. Well, the problem is these people would come out with stomach aches, headaches, facial flushes, itching, all sorts of things because they were hypersensitive. It is an excitotoxin, and it's hidden in many, many foods. And so that's why, my wife and I shop at the Mennonite farms. We shop at farmers markets. We make food at home all the time. I cook virtually every night. We make meals from scratch at home with quality ingredients. And I know I'm not getting these things in my system. And if you're going to drink soda, if you're going to drink pop, you're better off drinking it with sugar. At least we know what sugar is, and we know what it does. You'll get an insulin whip. Your blood sugar will spike. You'll feel lots of energy, especially if there's caffeine in it. And then your blood sugar will crash because the insulin then causes your blood sugar to drop back down and you feel hungry again. Well, that's one thing. But if you're getting pop that has aspartame in it, you're putting an excitotoxin in your system. And it amazes me that people routinely order diet pop, diet soda, and they're putting chemical compounds into their bodies without even thinking about the consequences. So if you want to be intelligent, you've got to turn down the toxicity in your brain as well.
Yeah, and you know what? I want to touch on this one more moment before we move on to the next thing, because it relates to hypnosis, or at least media and mass hypnosis. People have been indoctrinated into believing that fat is bad for you. Fat is going to make you fat. And it's
nonsensical.
Couldn't be further from the truth, right? You need to put quality fats in your diet, like the omega-3 that Mike talked about, coconut oil. I eat coconut oil all the time. And you need to avoid too many refined carbohydrates. And if you just simply make a change, I'm not going to tell you, Mike's not going to tell you to do this, but that's what we do.
It's what we do.
Avoid the processed carbohydrates, eat more quality fats, and see how different you feel.
See how different you feel. Talk about mixing representational systems and feel how different it looks.
Thanks for calling me on that one. Notice how different. Yeah, can you tell that I'm visual? I'm primarily a visual.
I'm getting a sense of that, Chris. And notice is nice because notice is digital. It doesn't lead you into any specific system.
Okay, I'm going to start using notice more often than see, because
I've noticed that you're endeavoring to do so.
Thank you. All right, so next on the list we have biographies.
Okay, now biographies are incredible. Because your brain and mine cannot tell the difference, as proven endlessly through hypnotic states, cannot tell the difference between a genuine experience and a vividly imagined one. So a vividly imagined one will go into your schema as something that actually happened. I remember I have mentioned in a previous podcast, I believe, a girl I used to go out with years ago who told me that when she was 4, she used to climb on the roof with an umbrella and leap off and float down like Mary Poppins. And I said, first of all, the physics of it probably wouldn't hold you up that well. Secondly, even if it did, how would you get up on the roof at 4 years old? And how would your parents let you do this? Repeat, okay, she's up on the roof again. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But she has a clear memory of this happening, and every time you access a memory, you edit it.
Yeah, you talked about this.
There is no memory recall. There's only memory editing, and we will be doing a podcast soon with an extensive study on memory, increasing memory, memorizing list numbers, and so on. I'm just going to put it out there for free and let you use it, which means, of course, it'll wind up in everybody else's material as their creation, but I can live with that because it's been the story of my life, Chris.
Yeah.
It pays to be an innovator, but there's a price one pays as well. So we're back to biographies. When one reads a good biography, well written, it doesn't matter what it's about or whose it is. It could be Mother Teresa's or Norman Schwarzkopf's or Charles Manson's. When you read a really good biography, although I would steer you away from the psycho killers, your brain takes in their experience into your schema. Mm-hmm. So you can build on your life experience by taking in the life experience of other people. If you're highly auditory, as I am, get books on tape, books on CD, books on MP3s, download them, listen to biographies, and let it go directly into your unconscious. Build your schema, build your base information. And it's important, I believe, to build your schema in many, many areas, biographies being one of them. I have been working for years at being a Renaissance man. I don't think there ever has been one since Leonardo da Vinci. My friend Nirmal Das, who's a professor at University of Waterloo, wrote a biography on Leonardo da Vinci. He knows everything about him. Claims he was the only Renaissance man, and knowing Nirmal's intelligence, I'm inclined to believe he's probably correct. But aiming at being a Renaissance man, a Renaissance woman, means covering all the aspects of your life. So that's why, I'm a martial artist. And, I study language, and I study architecture, and I study music and art, and all of these different things, and different religions and philosophies, because if you want to be a well-rounded person and study all these different areas, you will benefit from it because your schema will grow in leaps and bounds. When I studied cathedral architecture and Gothic cathedrals and began learning about triforiums and, clerestories and so on, that's what sparked in my schema and created the Architecture of Hypnosis course. Mm-hmm. It all interlocks. So biographies are yet another way to build your schema. But we're also on the whole reading thing, so we'll get to that as well.
Well, I want to just point this out. There's no doubt in my mind that not only do you present very well, Mike, when you're up on stage talking to a group of people, but you captivate the audience because you bring out so much of this knowledge that people find fascinating that you've accumulated over the years, right? So it really does benefit you because you're up there. And yes, you're a great presenter, but the content that you present just makes it so much more compelling, and it keeps people interested over and over and over again.
Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. It's been a misspent youth reading.
All right, so biographies. I'll tell a quick little story here. When the Steve Jobs biography came out, I went to Costco with my wife, and I saw it. And I'm a slow reader, and I always joke about how I'm a slow reader, so I
find that hard to believe because you're very quick-minded.
I think it's because I like to, in my head, pronounce every word, so I'm telling myself the story.
So you're sub-vocalizing.
Yeah, probably in some way I'm sub-vocalizing. So I tend to read quite slowly, and I tend to read a lot of nonfiction too, so I want to think about things.
You read fairly technical things as well.
Yeah, when I'm reading a biography, which I guess is technically nonfiction also, because it's not made up. But it's not technical material. It's easier to speed read material like that. But anyway, I still prefer audiobooks. But the point of the story is I went to Costco, saw the book, and it's huge. It's like 8 million pages. And I said, no wonder the shopping carts are so darn big at Costco. I mean, so I immediately went home and downloaded the audiobook instead, and I listened to it, and it was fantastic. It was like 25 hours of audio, but I learned so much about Steve Jobs' life and, being an entrepreneur. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times in the last, let's say, 2 years since I've listened to it, that I've thought back to that biography.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, a remarkable man, remarkable story, and people said he was, such a perfectionist and hard driver and that. But look what he accomplished, for crying out loud. I like to compare him with the other man he's often compared with the enormous. I didn't say that.
Nope.
With the enormous glasses, who basically deals with my flaws in my operating system of my computer by sending me another piece of duct tape every couple of nights to stick on this increasingly large ball of duct tape that the bloated operating system has become. But that's a horse of a different flavor, to mix metaphors. So back to this.
I love the gaffer tape rather than duct tape that you taught me.
Good,
I didn't know that word until you taught it to me.
Much more British.
And it's in my schema now. All right, let's talk about the next on the list, which is the Great Courses, something you've talked to me about. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've mentioned the Great Courses just a few times, but I really recommend this company. That's what it's called, the Great Courses. They're out of the United States, and I have no connection with them other than being one of their customers. They don't know I exist other than the fact that I buy things from them occasionally, but this company is phenomenal. And if you want to fill gaps in your education, fill gaps in your schema, just get smart in a particular area, learn something interesting, this company is the way to do it. You can buy courses on by download or on CDs or DVDs. Some of them play well on CDs. You don't need any visual. Others are DVD as well. And you might buy a course of 12 to 24 or 36 lectures. Each one is typically half an hour long. And the amazing thing about the Great Courses is they're reasonably priced. All of their courses go 70% off at least once a year. And get on their catalog list and find something that interests you. They get the best professors across North America, the absolute best as voted by their students, the best presenters, and they can present anything and make it absolutely fascinating. So you can study, logic, you can study medicine, you can study anatomy, you can study French language, you can study poetry, you can study, literature, writing, composition, anything. They have hundreds of courses. And you just pop it in your TV and you take a university course every night. The only thing is you're not going to be tested on it. There's no exam. And you do it purely for the joy of learning and building your schema. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Check out the Great Courses.
Okay, so we have several more things on our list here. Let's see if we can wrap them up. And this podcast is probably going to go a little bit longer than the average one.
What point are we at now?
We're at about, 27 minutes.
Okay, let's keep going quickly.
Okay, let's keep going. So the next one is languages. Oh, and by the way, the Great Courses, I'll put a link in the podcast notes on the website. So,
well, I'm looking at the points here. Thank you, Chris. I'm looking at the points here, and I can wrap these up fairly quickly for you. Also, apart from the Great Courses, check out the podcasts. Check out the iTunes University, where you can take university courses on your podcast for free.
Yeah.
Not on your podcast, on your iPod or on your iPhone.
Yeah,
and it's fantastic. And you can, astronomy, whatever, but podcasts, there's some brilliant podcasts out there. We like to think this is one of them that challenges you to learn and so on. And we keep stupidity and humor in for our own ridiculous reasons.
Leave a rating on iTunes.
Thank you. 5-star only. And the other thing I wanted to mention was sleep and exercise. Now, we've said you want to read versus television because reading is active, television is passive. But you also are going to have some downtime, and that's going to be your sleep time. Ensure you're getting enough sleep. If you want to be smarter, you have to sleep more. I mean, at least adequately. If you're not getting about 8 hours of sleep, the average person, you're probably not getting enough REM sleep. If you're not getting enough REM sleep in your cycles, do you know you need REM to integrate everything you've learned the day before? Not only the human Givens theory of processing unresolved emotional arousal, but you need REM sleep to integrate into your brain data, understandings, different learnings that have come in through the previous day. Without enough sleep, the material will drop out through the cracks again.
You talked about power napping on podcast episode 31, and I believe you said that before electric light was invented, people would sleep an average of 9 hours.
9 hours a day, yes.
Yeah.
And if you are kept away from all light and forced to go on your own circadian rhythm, what typically happens is that you go to about 10.3 hours of sleep. We need more than we're typically getting. And if you're waking up with an alarm, you are sleep deprived. I mean, you absolutely are, because it's waking you up when you're still in the sleep cycle. You can tell, because if you haven't woken up yet, it's because you haven't had enough sleep yet.
So, Mike, what do you say to, I'm sure a lot of people listening are going to think, well, but I have a job and I have a long commute and I have to get up early and I have to make the kids lunches and I have to, I have to get in the car and I have to drive and stuck in traffic.
Right. Well, if you cannot schedule in a nap, then you have to ensure you go to bed early enough, that your sleep cycle is ending when you have to get up. And of course, if you're on shifts, it's going to be a much more difficult thing to do. but you can make changes. The other one I was going to say was get sufficient exercise. Some people say 3 times a week. I don't think it's often enough, frankly. I feel so much better when I exercise 4 times a week than 3, because 3 times a week is 4 days off. And I think 4 times a week is 33% more exercise, and it seems to be a real turning point. Exercise will oxygenate your brain. It'll help you get the oxygen to the brain cells where it's needed. And, of course, you can also help that through various supplementation if your doctor permits it, things like ginkgo biloba, which will, from the ginkgo tree, increase the oxygenation to the brain cells.
Yeah, plus 2 points I want to make. First one is there is nothing forcing you to live the lifestyle that you do. So whatever commute and job and et cetera, if you're not happy, you can change things. No one can change it for you. You have to be the one to get yourself to threshold and make the changes that you want to make those changes in your life. Okay, so anyway, just food for thought. The other point I wanted to make is in terms of exercise, again, relating back to how people are hypnotized into believing, well, you're not going to get fit unless you exercise an hour a day or whatever it is. Bull.
It's nonsensical.
If you just have an active lifestyle and generally move, plus supplement that with something like Matt Fury's combat conditioning, which Mike and I both do, anything like that, body weight exercises that take you to peak intensity for a few minutes, you will be very, very fit.
Yes, I've said to Chris, I love running up the 3 flights of stairs in an airport with 2 armfuls of luggage while I'm watching guys in their 20s and 30s standing there going up on escalators.
Yeah, and it all comes, you think back to nature and the way the animals exert themselves. They lie there and they sleep in the sun, and then, boom, they chase their prey. And they're at full intensity for a small
short
moment
periods of time,
and then eat and sleep.
They don't typically run marathons.
And I know we didn't, chase prey to eat them, in the wild jungle, but that's, people did, have to hunt with spears or whatever back in the day.
Right.
It was the same thing. If you wanted to be fit, you were living the way your body was designed to live.
Otherwise, you wouldn't survive.
Right. And you didn't see cavemen running marathons.
Quite true, Chris. And most of them look emaciated. So let us back up. Yes, in fact, remember we said, if you really want to talk about fitness, the fittest people in any sport tend to be the gymnasts.
Yes.
Because they can map across and do the other sports quite well.
Yeah.
But the others can't. Not even cross-country skiers, swimmers, boxers tend to do the worst. Worst of all of them. And what do gymnasts do? Body weight exercises.
Body weight exercises. Yeah. In fact, we were talking about, just after jiu-jitsu class last week, I was saying, did you see, there was a YouTube video, I think, about George St. Pierre, who is he is the top UFC fighter. And he does a ton of gymnastics in his training because his trainer has him doing that, because gymnasts are the best overall well-rounded athletes.
Yep, well, there you go. And balanced physiology.
Smarter.
So let's wrap up this whole smartness thing now. I would like to give you, those of you listening, the empowering question of the podcast, which we started doing a few podcasts ago. Let this resonate with you and see what answers you come up with, and then apply them. And this empowering question for today is, what is beneath your problem? What is beneath your problem? What is it that's holding it up? And how can you remove that supportive structure? What's beneath your problem? What is it that's holding it up? And how can you remove that supportive structure?
Nice metaphorical question. All right, so while you digest the empowering question, Mike is going to deliver the closing metaphor.
I'll give you the headline edition, and Chris knows this is a true story. Many of my students have gone and made a pilgrimage to the site because it's such a weird one.
Yes.
This story is called The Banging Has Started. I won't give the actual address, but I will tell you the street. It was Mortimer Avenue in Toronto. I occasionally, very occasionally, I don't want to make it sound like this is a weekly thing, get called in to work on different cases that the police have not been able to build some sort of resolution with. For example, if it's an area where the police can't particularly solve the problem, it's outside their domain of control, or what they're able to do in a situation because of lack of manpower, sometimes I've been able to help. And this was one of those cases. A friend of mine, who we're going to call John, only because that was his name, who went on to become an Air Canada pilot, very interesting guy. His aunt, living on Mortimer Avenue in Toronto, began to experience some nightmarish supernatural phenomena in her house. It sounded like someone banging on the wall of the house with tremendous force that would make the house shudder. And she got frightened, called her nephew John. He came over, heard it too, and freaked out. Well, they thought it has to be someone banging on the outside of the house, so they called the police. about 3 times. But by the time the police arrived, the banging had always stopped. And so John then spoke to the cops, and he said, I'm going to ask my friend Mike Mandel to get involved. And the cops said, oh, are you talking about Mike Mandel, who we've seen at the Ontario Police College? And he said, yes. And they said, oh, good choice. See if he can help you with it. So John went out and bought rented a bag full of tools like, walkie-talkies and handcuffs and billy clubs and all kinds of bizarre things. And he said, we're going to catch these guys. It's got to be someone outside the house. Well, around this time, a second phenomenon started. Horrific, obscene phone calls in these hideous, cackling, demonic voices that would terrify his aunt. And so we set up a perimeter around the house. My friend Les, who has since passed on, was one of the guys, and a third man, and the 3 of us covered the house with 3 walkie-talkies. John had a walkie-talkie inside the house. Now, if you've ever used one, you know that if you're holding the transmit button, the only person who can be heard is you. It locks the line open, and the other people can be saying stuff, but they can only hear the person whose button is held down first. So I said, maintain radio silence. Don't say anything. John, take the other walkie-talkie into the house, and if you and your aunt hear the banging, just get on the walkie-talkie and tell us, and we'll converge on the house from 3 different directions and see if anybody's there. Well, Les, of course, this is a new toy. He just couldn't keep quiet, and he's doing these long, involved soliloquies. Okay, John, here's what I want you to do. He's holding the button down the whole time. I think what you should do is move toward the back of the house. And if you start to notice, and this, 3-minute monologue, meanwhile, John is screaming into the other walkie-talkie, the banging started! But all you can hear is Les saying, and you and your aunt should then... We can't hear any of this. Anyway, we finally realized the banging started. We converge on the house. This happens multiple times. But the person banging on the wall always slips past us in the dark. There's an alleyway, there's a row of hedges. We were baffled. And I went home that night completely freaked out, saying, how is this happening that we're not noticing? Is this something supernatural? And then I realized I was prepared to believe there might be something otherworldly hammering on the wall. But I was finding it very difficult to believe that something otherworldly was making obscene calls in this cackling voice. So it's got to be a person. And I fell asleep thinking this, and I woke up the next morning, and my unconscious mind said, it's coming from inside the house, just like in a movie. Well, the only other person inside the house was the lodger, the young woman in her 20s who lived in the basement apartment. And we'd already seen her, and she was terrified, saying, oh, the banging's scaring me to death. What is this? I said to John, get the police to confront the woman in the basement. It's her. And so he did. And she broke down on the steps, crying her eyes out, and said, yes, it's me. I broke up with my boyfriend. I've had a psychotic break. I need help. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did it. The police checked her apartment, found out she'd removed the drywall from the basement walls, and was hammering on the wall, the bricks, with a rubber mallet with all her strength. And it was one of the craziest, weirdest things I've ever seen. And so now, Chris, as you know, whenever life gets weird, we turn to each other and say, the banging started.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel podcast. This has been session number 32. We'll be back with more awesome content on session 33. Make sure you leave a rating on iTunes. You can just look at Brain Software with Mike Mandel in iTunes. Just Google it, and you'll find it. And you can leave us a rating and send us your feedback. Visit the website. Sign up for our email address so you can make sure that you're informed on all of the cool stuff that we're doing, the courses, etc., and we'll see you all in the next podcast.
When a felon's not engaged in his employment, of maturing his felonious little plans, his capacity for innocent enjoyment, is just the same as any honest man's. Our feelings we with difficulty smother, when constabulary duties to be done. What do you do when the banging has started? A policeman's lot is not an on. When constabulary duties to be done. A policeman's lot is not an happy one.
Where you get this stuff?
Gilbert and Sullivan.